So as we kind of keep going through it, it gives more detail about what this guy's life was at. He had spent everything, and there was a severe famine in the whole country that began to be in need. And that's the kicker about different countries. And I don't mean different countries than the United States. We're not talking about earth right now. We're talking about our heavenly country, the kingdom of Jesus. Every other country besides the kingdom of Jesus is famine. It always ends in famine. Choose any sin that you want, that you or I have chosen to try to be satisfied. Have you been satisfied? Have you ever been to a party where you're like, I got so drunk and I didn't even get hungover, I'll never need to get drunk again because I'll be fulfilled for the rest of my life? Right? No. Have you ever been like, that was such good sex outside of marriage, I'll never have a sex drive again? It's probably never happened. Don't answer that, but it's probably never happened, right? Have you ever had enough money where you said, I just never need another dollar? Even though I bet most of us in here probably have like 2-3 pairs of pants, right? We probably have like 2-3 pairs of shoes. You guys know me, I have like 5 shirts, right? We never pulled a shirt off the thing and been like, this is the last shirt. Well, I have actually, I'll be honest. I hate buying stuff, but whatever. I have different sins. I'm just like, does this fit? Yes, close enough. But the point is this land is nothing but famine to the soul. And no matter how much we get, once we leave the Father behind, once we leave his provision behind, it's nothing but famine. And the crazy thing is, in the beginning, he hits a famine, and what's his decision? What does he do? Because he's just like us. It says that there was a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. So this guy's so hungry. He doesn't leave the country. He stays there. You might say, well, he didn't have enough money to leave. They walked everywhere. Okay? Like a donkey was a valued object. Most people are literally not getting enough calories every day. The aim of most people's life, for most peasants or plebs, however you'd like to label it, their goal in life is to get enough calories that day. So a lot of these teachings that Jesus has, like, don't worry about tomorrow, it was very, very much applicable for them because they probably weren't going to eat enough in that very day. So this idea that, he couldn't do this or couldn't do that, unlikely. He just made a decision where he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try to fix this. Just like we do. I'm going to try. I'm in this country. I've liked the life that I've lived so far. The wild living was kind of my thing, and I'm kind of into it. I'm in a slump right now, but you know what? I'm going to go to this citizen of this country, and I'm going to see if he can hook me up. So he gets a job. He gets a job feeding pigs. Now, there could be another application there because Jews aren't supposed to touch pigs. Right? They can't eat pigs. They're not supposed to tend pigs. They were an unclean animal, and they would have nothing to do with pigs. So this guy is in a different country, in a different value system, and he's devalued by this country as a Jew, and now he's essentially the idea here, he is bottom of the barrel. He's wasted everything he has. We don't like people that waste things, do we? How many news stories do we get every day, whatever news channel you watch, where it's like somebody wasted something somewhere, and we're like, oh, they shouldn't do that, my tax money, right? So this guy's a wasteful guy. He's not faithful with what he had. He's a loser, okay? And he says, man, give me this job. I'm going to try to solve this myself. It says there, it goes on from there. He says, he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So he works for this guy, and he's so hungry, he's so downtrodden, he's so empty inside that he's looking at the slop that he's throwing to the pigs, and he said, I wish I could eat this. I wish I could find something. I will take anything to fulfill me. And isn't that, again, it's human nature, right? We will spiral and devalue, and all these things go on in our life, and if I could just have this, then I'd be satisfied. If it would just be this. It doesn't matter how low we get. It's incredible about how we'll still think, if I could just eat rotten food that pigs eat, then I would be full. Then I would be satisfied. Our value system plummets after we leave the farm. He goes on from there and it says this, no one gave him anything. I don't want to be a jerk, but I'm going to be straight up. Everyone in this world that doesn't know Jesus, which that sounds a little pompous, just roll with me, because they're like us, are out for themselves. And we are too. Because without the Spirit in our lives, we're self-serving. All right? And when we're in the world and we're doing worldly things, most of the people around us, I'm not saying people never do nice things. I mean, you have the Peace Corps, you have Toys for Tots. I'm not saying nobody does nice things. But at the end of the day, we're in it for ourselves. And this guy is experiencing that to the hilt. Can you imagine walking by a dude who's throwing pig slop? The word pod, this is the only place it comes in the New Testament. It means carob pod, which I'm like, my mom tried to give me carob when I was a kid too. Like, told me it was chocolate. Like, get out of here. But it's a carob pod. So can you imagine walking by some guy who's like emaciated, feeding pigs, and whatever he says, he's like, hey, boss, could I have a bite of this? And his answer is no. No, you cannot have a bite of that trash. You don't get that. Or walking by and seeing this guy and just being like, I'm not giving you anything. You get nothing from me. So he's in a country where no one will give him anything. That's not where he came from, right? He came from a place where his father gave him everything. So he comes back and it says this in verse 17. He says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? Your Bible, depending on your translation, may say when he came to himself, when he came to his senses, when he thought about it. It literally is, and this is just how English translates Greek, it literally is when he came to him. And if you want to get quite literal about it, it's in Greek would be when he, him. But the idea is when he came to himself, when he thought about it, when he got to this point where he was actually willing to rationalize with himself about what was happening. Does that make sense? Rational, critical thought about what's going down. So something changed in him. Before he wasn't with himself, right? Before he was thinking, how do I satisfy myself? He was rejecting truth in his life. He was just making stuff up as he went. If I do this, I'll be better. If I do that, I'll be better. If I can party a lot, I'll be better. Whatever it is, fill in the blank. So he's just acting like a human. And again, what's Jesus' point? His point is not, this is a terrible guy. His point is that God loves and cherishes and labors for everyone to bring him back to himself. That's the whole point of this parable, right? So you can take the person that many of us would be tempted to despise. I can't say your heart, but what do we think when we see someone who's wanton and partying, wasting their life, and is stubborn? Many of us are just like, nah, I don't have time for that, right? So that's where this guy is at. So he comes to his senses, and he makes this essentially an intellectual ascension. And he says, everybody that works for my dad has food. That's his ascension. Everyone that works for my dad gets enough to eat. And here I am, I'm starving to death in this other country. So he makes a plan. He says, I will set out and I will go back to my father and I'll say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and he went to his father. So in his plan and his response, he goes from, Father, give me what's mine, right? Give me mine. So that's a sense of entitlement. It's a sense of, we can get a little bit of glimpse into his ideology, his identity, that he sees himself as a deserving person. He sees himself as having a right to something he doesn't actually have a right to at that time. He sees himself as a person that knows what is best for himself. He needs to go to this other country. He needs to spend the money this way. He sees himself as resourceful. He gathers everything that is his, and he goes out and he sets out on that. But when he comes to his senses, what does he realize? I'm hungry, and I had everything. Everybody that even works for my dad has enough to eat. And so he makes a plan, and his plan is that he's going to go tell his father not what he deserves, not what his father should give him, not all the way that he's right about what he did, but he comes back and he says, he's going to say, Father, I sinned against you. Literally, sin means to miss the mark. I didn't do what was right. All of a sudden, there's this humility, an honesty, a brokenness, right? Where he's admitting, I didn't do what is right. This is like an epidemic in our world. The internet is all about not admitting that you didn't do what's right. Have you discussed anything recently with anyone that had any weight to it? And how many of us will say anything, especially the political parties, either one, will say anything to not look wrong. Anything. It's so bizarre because we think that somehow with all this protection of self and pride that we will be preserved, and that's what true life is. But in this guy's revelation, he comes to a place with his father where he's just going to tell him, I wronged you. He doesn't say, I'm back, Dad, and frankly, the way you raised me was kind of weak, and so that's what caused this, I had this turmoil in my heart, and he doesn't say he's going to do that, and maybe there was some of that. He doesn't say, you know what, my brother, he's a big jerk. Look at how he's acting about this calf now. He's kind of the problem. He just comes and says, I'm the problem. This is really important for our Christian walk. We have to admit to God, if we're going to get anywhere in our life, spiritually, you know what the problem is with me? That's where it is.